Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Megan Doherty of One Stone Creative, and here I am today with Kaitlyn Kessler. Now, Kaitlyn Kessler is a graphic designer who specializes in creating the assets that help business owners produce thorough, high-value content to their audiences and still have enough time to actually run their businesses. From course materials to content upgrades, Kaitlyn gives entrepreneurs back their time. Kaitlyn, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I love that.
Well, to get started, I just gave the overview there, but why don't you tell everybody who's watching a little bit more about your business and kind of the magic that you create for your clients?
Yeah. So I do basically what you said in that intro. I kind of partner with creative entrepreneurs that are doing big things in their business. So yes, they're writing blog posts, but they're also, hosting retreats or going to conferences or making courses, and they need a lot of visuals to support that.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be kind of promotional graphics or just kind of things to share on social media or content upgrades or things to, kind of supplement what they're teaching in courses. And so I join and partner onto their teams, and I do all of that for them. It's a fun job because I get to, really be invested and involved in people's businesses. And it's also, gets to kind of stretch my designer muscles and feel creative. So that's exciting.
That's fantastic. And I know everyone who's watching right now who does all of their own assets currently is just like, oh my God, I need this person.
That's kind of what I have found. There are a lot of graphic designers out there, but not as many that do kind of what I want to do and what I do for clients. So it's exciting when people find me and it's, needed, and I get a lot of work to do.
Well, definitely. And it's so much work, especially around courses or to promote a big event that's coming up. I mean, there's so much, you get started on this and you have a great idea about this cool thing that you want to create, and you have no idea really just how much creative collateral you need.
Yeah.
Do you find that your clients, do they understand when they hire you just how much it is that they already do, or are they newer? Like, what is that? Do you tell people what you can create for them? How does that work?
It's kind of, I guess, a healthy mix of both, honestly. So some of the people that I worked with when I first got started doing this sort of work, they had an idea. Either I was, replacing somebody, or I was kind of extending on what maybe they had a designer doing kind of one-off projects.
Yeah.
So they had an idea of what I could be doing, and then it's just kind of grown and escalated over time. But a lot of the people I start working with, I'm maybe the second or third person they're kind of bringing onto a team. Their business is growing and scaling, so they're kind of developing a team, but they haven't had anyone do visual things for them. And so they'll say, most of them will start with social media graphics because that's kind of obvious. And then they'll be like, oh, like, do you do this? Like, yeah, I can do that. Do you do this? Yeah, I can do that. I can also do this, this, and this. And it kind of goes and goes and goes.
Fantastic. So let's talk a little bit what a lot of entrepreneurs are going to be in this situation is you have to create a lot of different types of assets, as you were just mentioning, across different platforms, and everyone's got a specific brand, a specific image or feeling that they're trying to convey. When you're working across platforms, how do you maintain a consistent visual brand?
Yeah. So it kind of can vary on where I start with a client in that situation. Sometimes if you've worked with a branding designer to kind of set up your initial things like your logo and stuff like that, you might come in already knowing your color palette, knowing what fonts you're going to use, or you might have no idea about that and you've just been kind of winging it. Mm-hmm. So either way, to kind of get that set in stone first. And I think that's important for anybody that's making I think that's important even if you're not making fonts, even if you're just making blog graphics, kind of having set in stone the main colors that you're going to use, the main fonts that you're going to use, 2 at max 3 of those, and keeping that part consistent, that will do wonders for you. You can advance that more and start to have, different kind of elements. Like maybe you always have a really light kind of watermark or something in the background, or maybe you use the same types of stock photos or something like that. But I think like at its most basic kind of level, really having established colors and fonts can do wonders for you, so that everything starts to look and feel. And when someone sees you on Pinterest, they say, hey, that kind of looks like something I saw on Instagram, so that you kind of start to have that recognizability, if that's even a word.
I think so.
Yeah. And I mean, there's wiggle room. It doesn't have to be like the exact same all across the board if you don't like that for whatever reason, but it really does need to be kind of the same look and feel. Like I'm not going to post one thing one day that's, really dark and heavy colors and lots of like blacks and maroons. And then the next day post something with like pastels and like yellows and stuff like that. Like I just wouldn't, do the same thing for your audience.
For sure. And is that kind of thing, that huge variance in what people are creating? Do you see that a lot in people you either are or should be working with?
I start to see it a lot. I think most people will have a good handle on like some key kind of colors they're going to use. Where I start to wonder if I should pitch myself to somebody is when I see a lot of different fonts. That's probably like my own personal kind of pet peeve or thought. But yeah, I think if you have a different font on every graphic, or if you start to bring in just like a lot of options, it gets confusing, and people like to know what to expect. People like that consistency that builds trust and everything. So kind of dwindling it down to as few as possible would be my, I guess, advice.
Well, that's a really interesting point, actually, is that the visual consistency adds to trust. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Like, that's a really fascinating idea.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like, I'm going to use probably a really overdone example here, but if you think about like Apple products, like there's a level of consistency, and people come to know that as being, it functions well, and I like using the interface, and that consistency starts from, the commercial you might see to opening the box. Like there's always the same look, the same feel, the same like white space, all of that really starts to build into like, this is reliable, this is streamlined, this is efficient, and supports that message. So, I mean, you might not be Apple, and that might not be the message you want to convey, but the choices that you make and like keeping consistent with that will start to, really push home and drive home whatever it is that you want your message to be. So if it's that you're, fun and happy, you need to have fun and happy happening all the time. You can't suddenly post something that's, not.
Cool. And so would you say that the kind of the inverse is also true? And if you are more scattered like that, it's harder for people to maybe, trust you enough to buy something?
Oh yeah, totally. If you're not kind of always driving home whatever it is that you eventually are going to try to be funneling people into buying, like if you're not always pushing that kind of message and that feeling home, I think your sales will show. It won't be as as high as you want, because at the end of the day, like for most of us, we're working online, like kind of trust and that message and that visual thing is like all we really have. I'm not like meeting people in person and winning them over with my smile or whatever. I have to depend on people looking at something and saying, this is professional, this is consistent, she must know what she's talking about, etc.
Okay, that's fantastic. I really like that. Thank you for that. I'm going to swing things along a little bit to the tech that people can use. So you're a designer, and you've got all these great tools that your average layman may not have access to or know how to use. So there are all these kind of alternatives for entrepreneurs and bloggers like Stencil and Canva. What do you think of this kind of do-it-yourself tool, and how does it fit into someone's growth? When should they, or do they need to upgrade to a designer to take care of that for them?
So I think those kinds of tools are good for kind of getting started and getting your feet wet and making sure that you are kind of presenting a visual, presence and everything online. Like me personally as a designer, I don't like using them. Just to be
I would assume no less.
I finally have gotten to the point where I feel confident in my own, talking to people, being like, oh, no, I won't work on Canva for you. We're going to do it on a professional software. I'm a professional, etc. But I think for somebody getting started, that maybe bringing a designer on isn't really an option right away. I think they're great tools, but I think that you shouldn't lose the idea that doing just a little bit of research on design, you don't have to be a designer, you don't have to get a 4-year degree, but knowing some basic kind of rules and just doing like an hour or two of research on some rules can really help make sure that you're using those programs to still kind of give an air of professionality and just like seriousness, and not have it look necessarily cheap or free or anything like that.
Yeah, because you don't want to look like you used a DIY tool even when you used a DIY tool.
Yeah. And I don't think you have to, I think it's great if you want to get a 4-year degree. I think it's super great if you want to hire a designer, but I think you can do a little bit of research and still give off that vibe, or at least be, moving in that direction.
Okay, I'm not going to put you on the spot for it while we're live on the call, but I am going to ask you afterwards if you have a recommendation for where someone could start that research, and we'll pop it in the link beneath the video.
Okay, sounds good.
So, kind of on the scale, when someone is scaling up their business and they're growing their business, what would you say are the signs that someone should really be saying, okay, I should bring in a designer now?
I have a lot of answers to that. Like, if you are going to be charging premium prices, you need to be giving premium products, and that includes the things that are designed. So workbooks and whatever for your courses, I think there should be a designer involved, even if it's not somebody like me that's like on retainer and there all the time, at least for that course, you know, at least for that workbook or worksheet or whatever.
Okay.
Other, like if you're thinking retainer, is when you're spending more time kind of fumbling around Canva or trying to teach yourself Photoshop or something like that, than actually focusing on the thing that you are good at and the thing that is your business.
Yeah.
I think it might be time to, you know, outsource and bring on a designer.
Okay, fantastic. Let's talk about online courses a little bit more because, as I know you know, they are so huge right now. People are making them. They're great for growing your audience. They're great for teaching what you need to teach as part of your funnel. And worksheets are a really high value part of that. They really add to the perceived and the actual value of a course. So do you have maybe just a couple of pieces of advice for someone who's creating a worksheet for a student? What makes a worksheet really, really good?
So something that I do whenever I design it, and something that I like when I'm the person actually working on a worksheet from a course or something, is that there needs to be room to do things. Like there shouldn't just be 20 questions in a row. There should be a question and a place to answer, whether it's lines or a box or even just a blank space. I think kind of separating things out and giving people time to read the question, digest it, and actually answer it will be better for the student, will be better for your course overall, because they'll probably have a higher success rate if they can actually answer the questions and aren't just, you know, left to kind of think about it, but you can actually take a pen to paper or type it in. To that note, I think especially if you're working with a designer, they should be able to make it both fillable and printable so that you can appease, you know, different types of students, people that want to print it off and actually write it down, people that want to just fill it out, you know, on their computer. And I think otherwise, I personally do this whenever I design something, is leaving space for like brainstorms and notes and random things that might come up while they're watching the content that maybe you didn't think was the driving home point that you need to emphasize, but to them really resonated. You want there to be space for those sorts of notes and things to happen. I think most of us kind of in this online space have a little bit of creativity. So really giving space for that to kind of flow is I think really important.
Okay, I love that. That's fantastic. And we are going to have a worksheet with some of those points that's going to be available for download. Thank you, Kaitlyn, and we'll get you a copy of that as well, of course, but I absolutely love that, and I think that is something everyone should have that by their desk when they're creating worksheets, and they should be sending that to the designer and absolutely everything.
Thank you.
So what other kind of design do you do for course creators?
So a lot of workbooks, a lot of worksheets, a lot of promotional materials, and then things like that maybe people don't think of right away are like the slide decks and the presentations that it's not just your face on the course all the time, but you can go back to having some kind of visual thing and cues and notes that you should be writing down. So making slide decks that are on brand and powerful and really driving home certain points are a big part of courses and a big part of what we do for courses.
And outside of courses, going back to the wider world of design, what are your favorite things to create?
If on my Instagram, there's always posted these workbooks and like custom icons. I mean, from just a creative standpoint, those kind of allow me the most like freedom and just kind of, you know, opportunity to explore and just really create. So I really enjoy making workbooks. Like the bigger, the better. Like sign me up for like a 50-page workbook. I'm into that.
Amazing.
And then, you know, custom icons. So if someone's doing like a sales page and they want to kind of emphasize each module or something with one little distilled down image, I like to create those a lot.
Oh, that's fun too, because then you're really kind of taking the text or the verbal content and translating it into something that's visually understandable.
Yeah, and I think that helps people actually reading. I mean, I think we're in the day and the age of like 140 characters, so big paragraphs, we all skim them. So getting visual cues are probably a little bit easier.
Perfect. And you brought up 140 characters, so I'm going to ask about social media graphics. Okay. These are really important, and correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is, you know, social media posts, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, are going to perform better with images. What's your take on that?
I agree. I don't know the percentage off the top of my head, but I know there is one that gets referenced a lot.
And it's that percentage, everybody, that one right there.
It's a high number. I think it's like 60 plus at least %.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, regardless, visuals do. I mean, I read on my phone or my Kindle, you know, a lot of books and things like that, but to be honest, when it comes to reading like really lengthy blog posts, I'm skimming. I'm looking for like
Yeah.
the headings and the subheadings. And I think that is shown in kind of how we digest information, visual, quick impact, short amounts of words, things like that, just do perform better because we can digest it quicker and easier and decide if we want to click in and read more or explore more. So social media graphics are a large part of what I do, and it's everything from, like blog post titles and things to get you to click through and look at that blog post, to just kind of quotes and inspiration, to testimonials and things like that. But I think kind of showing that visually is just always going to have more of an impact because more people are going to actually read it.
Fantastic. And do you have a couple of rules of thumb for people who, again, are kind of at that stage before they hire you to create their social media graphics that are going to be effective and help them, get to the point where they can hire out their design?
Yeah. So like I said before, like with kind of the color palettes and the fonts, you want that to be the same kind of stuff that you're using throughout any of your graphics. And then for me with social media graphics, I think something that is really important in all design, but in social media graphics too, is kind of the idea of like less is more. That Coco Chanel quote about like removing an accessory before you leave. Like, I think that applies to design too. You don't need to have everything in there. It can be simple and it can be effective. I have a personal pet peeve. Like if you're using a script font, don't add space or kerning between the letters because it makes it completely illegible and you can't read it. I know, I can't read that. It's so hard. But I think overall, like the overarching advice would be just to use the same kind of look and feel and colors and fonts that you're using elsewhere. Like make that decision, narrow down, even if it's just one font that you use within all of your branding, that's phenomenal. And I guess when you're designing it, when you're in, Canva or something, if you haven't hired a designer, like go ahead, go crazy, and then look at it and start to remove a few things.
Okay.
And I think that you'll probably be in a better place.
Oh, I love that, because that's like for the advice for writers is write drunk, edit sober.
I like that. I'm reading, I'm almost done with Essentialism by Greg McKeown, and I don't know if I'm saying his last name right. And it talks a lot about kind of that idea of like simplifying and getting, to the point and doing what is essential. And so I think that kind of translating that to other parts of my life is very obvious in design and in good design.
Very cool. So let's say someone has, made a bunch of good strides. They've got pretty good, solid design they're doing themselves, and they're ready to hire a designer. What is a good client? How does a good client talk to a designer? And as a designer, how do you get from a client what you need in order to create something they're going to be happy with?
Yeah. I think starting the relationship, both parties being very aware that it is a new relationship and should be fostered as such, and that there's going to be questions and there's going to need to be communication. In time, things will shift and you'll need less clarification and they can give you less, specific instructions and things like that. But just really understanding that those first maybe 2 weeks to a month is going to involve a lot of communication, and being okay with that and being prepared for that is really important. As far as like actually assigning tasks, what works best for me and what I prefer is using something like Asana or Trello or Basecamp and being actually assigned things with due dates. I have some clients that's how we work because that's how they have their whole business organized, and that's phenomenal. When it's just kind of things, like just given to you over email or given to you kind of rough, then it comes on to me to be organized, which I am pretty organized, but I don't know if you can say that about like all designers or all creatives. Like usually organization really is. So yeah, that's kind of my thought. My other kind of, I guess, thought or thing that I would hope that other people hiring designers would think about is that being a designer does not necessarily mean that you are a copywriter. So in fact, it probably never means that.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. So if you're going to want to assign things like social media graphics or things like that, either, give us a bank of copy to use, or say, go find some quotes from these 5 people, or give us a little more direction than just quotes, because I don't know what quote is important to you or to me, or to whoever. So yeah, those are kind of, I think, things that come up a lot in my business, and things that I think would be wise to think about when hiring a designer.
That is some very wise advice. Thank you for that. So I'm getting about to the end of my questions here, and I would just like to ask for everyone who's listening, what is your top piece of advice for a content creator? I know you mentioned a couple of really, really good things, but if you had to pick just one thing that if someone was going to do as they're creating their own design, what would that be for them?
I think if you are kind of getting into that world and starting to create more and more and more, some of the stuff we mentioned earlier, like less is more and all of that, like keep that in mind, or top of mind or front of mind,
Mm-hmm.
whatever the saying is. But I also think once you have made those decisions, I mean, yes, there are times and places for rebrands and for kind of changing things up. But overall, I think once you've sort of made those decisions, really kind of sticking to your guns and not getting into that mindset of like, oh, well, that looks really cool, I want to do that. Oh, that looks really cool, I like how she did that, I want to do that. Because then you start to do, the all over the place inconsistent thing.
Yeah.
So kind of making decisions and sticking to them and standing behind them. Maybe that evolves, but it shouldn't be changing like every week or anything like that.
Fantastic. And all right, where do people find you? Where do they hire you? How do they find out more?
So my website is thecrownfox.com, and that's actually what I am across all social media as well. I'm probably most active on Instagram, so we can go hang out there. And otherwise, I have coffee chats going out in my newsletter each week. So if you ever want to hop on a call and just kind of hang out, doesn't have to be business related. It can just be getting to know each other. I am definitely open to those sorts of conversations.
Absolutely fantastic. Kaitlyn, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.